Most people think wealth is measured by the number in their bank account. They imagine a single finish line, become rich, and the game is won. But real wealth is not a static number. It is a spectrum of freedom, influence, and meaning that unfolds in levels. Each level doesn't just change what you can buy, it transforms the way you think, the way you live, and even the way you see yourself. At the first level, money is oxygen. Without it, every thought is consumed by survival. Bills, food, rent, nothing beyond the next week feels safe. This is not living but enduring. At this stage, wealth is not luxury. It is the fragile space between chaos and stability. As you move up, something shifts. Wealth begins to act like a shield. You no longer fear the wolf at the door. You can afford comfort, routines, maybe even small pleasures. But here lies the trap. Comfort can be a golden cage. Many stop here, confusing stability with freedom. True freedom emerges only when your money works harder than you do. When your assets begin to pay for your life, wealth stops being chains of effort and becomes wings of choice. At this level, the clock loosens its grip. You wake up not because you must, but because you choose. Beyond freedom lies abundance. Wealth becomes more than protection, it becomes creation. You start to shape reality itself, funding dreams, opening doors for others, building something greater than yourself. And yet, even abundance is not the highest form. The final level is legacy. Here, wealth is no longer measured in possessions, but in permanence. It outlives you. It carries your values, your vision, your name into the future. Legacy wealth is not about fortune. It is about impact, about whether the mark you leave on the world will vanish with your breath or echo for generations. Wealth, then, is not a single destination. It is a journey through levels of freedom, each demanding a new mindset, a new discipline, and a new responsibility. The real question is not simply how much do you have, but at what level are you living, and what level are you aiming for? So, right now, let's see the 5 levels of wealth. Level 1. Survival. Wealth. Poor is not the one who has little, but the one who desires much. Seneca. The first level of wealth is not about luxury, nor about lifestyle choices. It is about breathing. It is about the daily struggle to keep your head above water, paying for the essentials, food, rent, electricity, basic survival. At this stage, the relationship with money is not strategic, but urgent. Every dollar that comes in already has a destination. There is no room to plan for the future because the present devours everything. Here, the mind is hijacked by worry. At the end of each month, the weight of debts or the uncertainty of covering basic needs creates a constant background of anxiety. It is like living in a permanent state of alert where every small setback, an unexpected bill, a medical issue, or even a temporary job loss has the power to collapse the fragile balance you are clinging to. Time itself becomes an enemy. The person at the survival level trades hours of life for money, but the money is never enough to buy back peace of mind. Investments, growth, or opportunities are not even on the table, only making it through the next paycheck. Life shrinks into short cycles of scarcity, where even the smallest desires feel like unreachable luxuries. From a Stoic perspective, this level is especially cruel because it traps the mind in what cannot be controlled. Epictetus reminded us that true freedom does not lie in external things, but in our relationship to them. Yet when your stomach growls, or the electricity bill threatens to cut you off, this philosophy feels almost impossible to practice. Lack of money shrinks the space of choice, and without choice, human dignity is constantly tested. This stage also carries a dangerous psychological trap, the belief that wealth is unattainable. People who live for years at the survival level often internalize the idea that they were born for scarcity. That mentality reinforces the cycle, stealing the energy needed to create alternatives, learn new skills, or take risks. The fear of losing the little they have is so strong that it prevents the movement toward the next level. And yet, hidden within survival is a hard-earned lesson, the real value of money. Those who endure this stage know better than anyone the difference between necessity and desire, between urgency and whim. If transformed into discipline and long-term vision, that awareness can become the very foundation for breaking free. The issue is not recognizing the harshness of survival, it is in accepting it as destiny. At this first level, wealth should be seen not only as money, but as breath. The first step is to escape the cycle of urgency by creating the smallest margin of safety. A tiny savings buffer, a skill that generates extra income, a narrow space between earning and spending. Every dollar saved is not just a number in an account, but a brick laid in the foundation of future freedom. Survival is the ground floor of the wealth pyramid. Everyone begins here, but it is not a place to remain. It is the stage that teaches resilience, discipline, and brutal clarity about the cost of dependence. And it is also the silent warning. As long as your life is held hostage by the bills of the month, you are not the owner of your time. And without mastery of time, there can be no real freedom. Level 2. Comfort wealth. It is necessary to have what is essential for life, but the one who pursues the superfluous will never find peace. Seneca. The second level of wealth is marked by a sense of relief. After the exhausting struggle for survival, a space to breathe finally appears. The essential bills are no longer a constant threat. Rent is paid, the fridge is full, and there is even room for small indulgences. A dinner out, an occasional trip, the purchase of something long desired. Money stops being mere oxygen and begins to feel like a thin blanket against the cold winds of scarcity. But comfort, while it feels like victory, is deeply ambiguous. It brings a temporary peace, yet it hides a silent trap. The illusion of permanent security. At this stage, many people believe they have made it. They build stable routines, follow predictable careers, and purchase goods that reinforce their sense of stability. Yet this stability is fragile, for it still depends entirely on constant work. If the flow of income is interrupted, the castle of comfort can collapse within a few months. Stoicism warns us about this very attachment. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that everything we have can be taken from us in an instant. And at the comfort level, this truth cuts especially deep. Those who live here no longer fear hunger, but they fear losing the standard of living they have built. Anxiety does not disappear, it merely changes shape. Instead of the fear of survival, it becomes the fear of social decline. It is also at this stage that many fall into the trap of consumption. Since they no longer struggle just to get by, they try to fill emotional voids with material goods. A better car, a larger house, designer clothes, symbols that serve more to prove something to others than to expand personal freedom. In this way, instead of using comfort as a springboard toward true freedom, many transform it into another kind of prison. The danger of comfort is subtle. It feels safe enough to lull people into complacency, yet unstable enough that they remain chained to their work. They have escaped the desperation of survival, but not the dependency that survival created. This is why so many remain stuck at this level for life. They adapt to a pleasant routine, but never dare to build the systems, investments, assets, new skills that would allow them to break free. And yet, comfort does have its hidden power. It provides stability to think, to plan, and to choose with greater clarity. The challenge is to resist the temptation of settling. Those who treat comfort as a destination remain forever bound to it. But those who see it as a platform can use it to construct the bridge to freedom. True wealth begins when comfort is no longer the ceiling, but the floor. When the energy once spent on surviving is redirected to building. When the focus shifts from maintaining today's stability to creating tomorrow's independence. Comfort wealth, then, is not the end of the journey. It is the doorway, a place to pause, but not a place to stay. Level 3. Freedom. Wealth. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Epictetus. At the third level, wealth begins to shift from survival and comfort into something more powerful, partial freedom. This is the stage where your assets, investments, or alternative sources of income start covering your essential costs without relying entirely on your active labor. In other words, even if you stop working for a while, life doesn't immediately collapse. Your rent, food, and basic needs are supported by something beyond your immediate effort. This transition marks a psychological revolution. Money is no longer just a shield against fear, but a tool that buys time. For the first time, the clock loosens its grip. You are not yet entirely free, but you have options. You can take a break from a job you dislike, explore a side project, or decline opportunities that don't align with your values. Work becomes less of a desperate necessity and more of a chosen path. Still, this level is fragile. Freedom is partial, not absolute. A sudden financial crisis, a market downturn, or unexpected expenses can quickly erode the sense of independence. That is why this stage demands wisdom. The Stoics taught that external things, money, health, status, are not fully under our control. Freedom wealth is proof of this truth. You cannot guarantee the future, but you can build resilience, ensuring that one shock does not destroy your foundation. At this level, people often face a new inner challenge, complacency. Because life feels lighter and safer, there is a temptation to stop pushing forward. One begins to think, this is enough, without realizing that partial freedom is still dependence in disguise. You are free only as long as nothing goes wrong. And life, as Marcus Aurelius reminded us, is unpredictable by nature. The true strength of this stage lies not in consumption, but in direction. If survival taught you resilience and comfort taught you discipline, freedom wealth teaches you responsibility. With more choices comes the burden of choosing well. You are no longer forced by necessity, but guided by vision. How you use this new space, whether to grow, to invest in yourself, or to waste it in distraction, determines whether you rise to the next level or fall back into the cycle of dependence. Freedom wealth also exposes the real meaning of enough. Seneca wrote that he is most wealthy who is content with the least. The paradox is that many reach this stage and yet remain trapped by desires that stretch beyond their actual needs. Instead of enjoying the autonomy they have created, they increase their expenses, upgrading lifestyles until their partial freedom disappears. What could have been a bridge to abundance becomes a treadmill once again. But for those who use this stage wisely, freedom wealth becomes a seed. It is the space to take bold steps, starting a business, investing in projects, or deepening skills that multiply returns in the future. It is the level where money stops being only survival fuel and becomes a lever for transformation. Partial freedom is not the final goal, but it is the first taste of what true independence feels like. It whispers a dangerous truth. Life does not have to be chained to endless work. Once you've experienced this, you can never look at survival or comfort in the same way again. You realize that wealth is not about possessions. It is about control over your time. And once you've had even a small share of that control, you will hunger for the next level. Level 4. Abundance and influence. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Seneca. At the fourth level, wealth evolves beyond survival, beyond comfort, beyond the fragile margins of partial freedom. Here, money is no longer a question of necessity, but of possibility. Abundance wealth is when you can shape your life deliberately, with choices unrestricted by the fear of losing stability. You are not simply secure, you are empowered. At this stage, wealth becomes expansive. It allows you to travel without counting every coin, to pursue projects not for survival, but for passion, to invest in opportunities that align with your vision rather than merely your paycheck. More importantly, it gives you the ability to extend your influence outward. Abundance means you can help others, not just through charity, but by creating opportunities, jobs, or resources that ripple far beyond your own needs. This is where wealth transforms into agency. When your resources can build, nurture, and multiply impact, you are no longer just protecting yourself, you are shaping the world around you. Whether through investments, philanthropy, or entrepreneurship, your wealth begins to act as a tool of creation. Money stops being a defense mechanism and becomes an instrument of influence. But abundance carries its own tests. The Stoics warned that prosperity is more dangerous than adversity because it tempts the soul with vanity. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to remain simple, even as emperor, resisting the seduction of excess. At this level, the danger is not scarcity, but overindulgence. People with abundance often lose themselves in consumption, buying status rather than meaning, mistaking luxury for fulfillment. The challenge is to remain anchored in purpose, to remember that abundance is a means, not an end. The greatest advantage of this stage is freedom of direction. You can say no to almost anything, and yes to what truly matters. Time, which at the first levels was sold hour by hour, now expands. You can dedicate it to growth, family, art, service, or simply reflection. In Stoic terms, this is when wealth finally aligns with virtue. It supports a life lived according to values rather than fears. Abundance wealth also forces a question: what will you do with the power it gives you? Seneca observed that wealth is only valuable if it is placed in service of wisdom. At this level, money has more impact on others than on yourself. Your influence becomes undeniable. What you choose to fund, support, or ignore changes not only your life, but the lives of many. For some, this stage becomes a playground of self-indulgence. For others, it becomes the foundation of legacy. The difference is not in the numbers, but in the mindset. Abundance can either amplify your ego or magnify your purpose. Used wisely, it is the soil in which lasting contributions are planted. This level is also the most deceptive because it can feel like the end of the journey. Many stop here, mistaking abundance for the peak. But the truth is that there is still one final stage: legacy. Abundance is the threshold, the preparation, the moment when you realize that your wealth is no longer only about you. It is about what you leave behind. Abundance wealth, then, is not measured by how much you consume, but by how much freedom, creation, and influence you embody. It is the point where money is no longer about survival or comfort, but about shaping destiny. And the real question becomes, will you let abundance end with you, or will you carry it forward into something greater than yourself? Level 5. Legacy wealth. What we do now echoes in eternity. Marcus Aurelius. The fifth and final level of wealth transcends the individual. Survival is about enduring. Comfort is about stability. Freedom is about choice. Abundance is about expansion. But legacy is about permanence. At this stage, wealth is no longer measured in luxuries or even in freedom. It is measured in continuity, what remains when you are no longer here. Legacy wealth is when your resources, vision, and influence outlive you. It is the creation of systems, institutions, and traditions that continue to function without your presence. This might take the form of a family estate, a business that thrives across generations, a foundation that funds education, or even ideas and writings that carry your name long after you're gone. Money itself becomes less important than the structures it sustains. Here, wealth transforms into impact. What you leave behind is not just financial inheritance, but the values that inheritance carries. A fortune without philosophy dissolves quickly, but when guided by wisdom, wealth becomes a force for shaping future generations. The Stoics understood this deeply. They often wrote not only for their time, but for us, their descendants, embedding their values into words that would echo across millennia. In the same way, legacy wealth is not simply about capital. It is about transmitting a vision of life. This stage, however, requires profound discipline. Legacy is not built accidentally. It is crafted with intention. It demands long-term thinking that stretches beyond personal comfort. Those who reach this stage must ask, what story will my wealth tell after me? Will it vanish in indulgence, or will it carry meaning? The truth is that legacy cannot be faked. Money can buy monuments, but only character builds memory. The danger here is pride. Legacy can be pursued for ego rather than purpose, turning it into a quest for immortality rather than service. True legacy wealth, however, is humble. It seeks not to preserve your name for vanity, but to ensure your resources serve others in ways you may never even witness. As Seneca wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." To accept mortality is to recognize that legacy is not about clinging to life, but about passing on light. At this level, time itself changes. You no longer live only for today or even for tomorrow. You live for generations. Your decisions are guided by the awareness that your actions will ripple far beyond your lifespan. Wealth, in this sense, becomes spiritual, a responsibility to steward resources in alignment with principles that endure. Legacy wealth is not about numbers, it is about resonance. The greatest fortunes can vanish in a decade if they lack purpose, but modest estates can influence centuries when tied to wisdom. What truly matters is not the scale of what you leave, but the strength of the roots you plant. And so, the journey of wealth finds its summit here. From survival to comfort, from partial freedom to abundance, the path culminates in legacy, the only form of wealth that transcends death. Legacy wealth is not the end of a financial story, but the beginning of a human one. It is the bridge between your life and the lives that follow. A final proof that true wealth is not what you gather, but what you give forward. Wealth is not a number, nor a finish line. It is a journey through levels of freedom, responsibility, and purpose. At the base, survival is about breath, scraping together enough to endure another day. Comfort follows, offering relief and stability, yet often disguising itself as the final destination. Partial freedom arrives when your money begins working for you, loosening the grip of necessity and opening the door to choice. Abundance expands that door into a horizon, giving you the power not just to live well, but to create, to shape, to influence. And legacy is where wealth ceases to be about you and begins to echo into the future, carrying your values long after you are gone. Each level is not simply about money, it is about mindset. A person stuck in survival learns resilience but must resist despair. One who lives in comfort must resist complacency. Those in freedom must guard against fragility. Those in abundance must master the temptations of vanity. And those who reach legacy must surrender pride, ensuring their wealth serves more than their name. The Stoics remind us that true wealth is not measured in coins or possessions, but in how we use what we have. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants, Epictetus wrote. Every level of wealth offers both lessons and dangers. To rise, you must not only grow in resources but also in wisdom. Without wisdom, survival becomes despair, comfort becomes stagnation, freedom becomes fragile, abundance becomes vanity, and legacy becomes hollow. So ask yourself, at what level are you living? More importantly, at what level are you aiming? Wealth is not about where you start, but about the direction you choose. To see money not as an idol, but as a tool, not as a finish line, but as a path, is to take the first step toward freedom. In the end, wealth is not what you accumulate, but what you enable. It is the capacity to live with purpose, to act with integrity, and to leave behind more than you were given. When viewed this way, the pursuit of wealth is no longer shallow. It is the pursuit of a life that matters.